What is up? Happy Friday. 2 minutes in the box with Gordo, the daily grind of news, rumors, and updates. Let's get to it. Lots of talking about today, about last night's games. 3 games on tonight, and the latest news and the rumors around the league. All right, let's go to the first one, the Battle of the Sunshine State, the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning. 2-0 dominating defensive win by the Florida Panthers. Nate Schmidt does it again. Third goal in the playoffs already. I mean, he's breaking records. I mean, it's the first time since like Jason Woolley in 96 and Rhino and Sasha getting the helpers right there. And then Sam Bennett doing his thing. Seth Jones, he's been a factor this whole time. Bob played outstanding. And, Tampa Bay, they are getting very reckless and stupid. Just ask Brendan Hagel, for example. He made a deliberate cheap shot to injure Sasha Barkov. I mean, that right there is a suspension. And according to my reports and sources, that Paul Maurice has said that he has 2 or 3 different lineup options tomorrow if Sasha Barkov can't play. And he hasn't been ruled out and hasn't been cleared yet. So we'll have a further detail, a confirmation later today or tomorrow before the game. Yeah, I think Hagel should be suspended. That was a cheap shot. Hagel just a hater. If he doesn't get suspended, I wouldn't be surprised that Matthew Kachuk is going to beat the living shit out of him, just like during the Four Nations. And Brandon Hagel, you better keep your head up, bud, because it's going to get ugly. The Battle of the Sunshine State, it's going to be rocking at Amerant Bank Arena at the Bank Vault. All right. Tomorrow is going to be electric. The Panthers could be dominating. They could be getting a 3-0 series lead. Can Tampa Bay get a chance to come back and take their home ice advantage, because the Panthers stole their home games away twice. Yeah, and I gotta tell you, the Panthers are the more dominant team. All right, now the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Ottawa Senators. The Battle of Ontario, it's been disappointing to say the least, because Ottawa lost another overtime game and the Leafs are up 3-0. Anything is possible in the playoffs. Anything is possible. And, can, the Sens repeat history with several different teams that were down 3-0 in the past? Perhaps or perhaps not. I mean, they had a great opportunity with Claude Giroux with first goal of the night. And then Toronto gets 2 more. Brady Tkachuk ties it up. And then the heartbreaker in overtime, Simon Benoit getting that game-winning goal. And Ottawa, good for you making the playoffs, but damn, you guys need to make the series more interesting and compelling. It's looking like it's over for the Sens. The Leafs, are dominant. Stolars is a phenom. I mean, we haven't seen a dominant goaltender by a Toronto Maple Leaf in a very long time. We're not counting James Reimer in that 7-game series back in 2013. They've had some catalog of goalies, along the way, from 2016 to, recently. But, I would go way backs with this one, Curtis Joseph, Eddie Belfour, Felix Potvin. Those are the most dominant goalies the last time the Maple Leafs have had. But Stolars is so far the MVP of the Stanley Cup playoffs. He's been dominant. Oh, yeah, he's dominant. And I wouldn't be surprised that Florida and Toronto, second round matchup, it's going to be uglier than 2 years ago. So, how much you want to bet that any Maple Leaf player is going to scream at Nick Cousins' face in the handshake line when it comes to Elimination Day? How much you want to bet that will happen? I wouldn't be surprised. And now let's get over to the Vegas Golden Knights and the Minnesota Wild. Minnesota Wild, a healthy team. It's dominant. I mean, just a phenomenal job. Kirill Kaprizov is a dynamo of a superstar, and so is Matt Boldy. Man, they are stacked to the brim. Ryan Hartman, Rossi. I mean, this team is dominating the series so far. Aiden Hill got pulled for Vegas and stuff. And Jack Eichel's been a ghost. He's a ghost. He's a ghost, ghost, ghost. Yeah. And Minnesota, this is the Minnesota team that everybody was like jaw dropped saying, oh my God, this team is invincible when they're healthy, but when they're not healthy, their stock in the standings dropped. And I'll tell you, you know, Minnesota could possibly make the biggest upset in the Stanley Cup playoffs this season. If Minnesota plays their cards right and take down the house in Vegas, oh yeah, the Minnesota Wild is Rain Man basically. Damn, I'm telling you, we're talking about the Minnesota Wild basically bankrupting every casino in Vegas and their Rain Man. Where's Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise? They would love this shit right here. They love it because you got to take the underdog in Vegas. You better get your stuff together, because you're 2 games away of going back to the golf course and enjoying the buffet, the Bellagio, and Caesar's Palace. All right, last up, the St. Louis Blues against the Winnipeg Jets. 7-2 dominating win for the St. Louis Blues over the Winnipeg Jets. Connor Hollaback got yanked. Feels like last year and 2 years ago. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. The Blues dominated at home. And Pavel Buchnevich, what a game he played. First playoff career hat trick for this young kid. And I'll tell you, you know, St. Louis is going to make this series very compelling. Cam Fowler stepped up in a good way. I got a feeling this is going to be tied up before we know it. And I believe that this series is going to be a best of 3 between 5 to 7 games. If St. Louis plays like they did last night into the next game, boy, oh boy, I tell you, the St. Louis Blues will make this series interesting. And Winnipeg, don't panic just yet. I know you won the President's Trophy, but don't panic because you guys got to bounce back. You got to bounce back. And it was an embarrassing showout. It was an embarrassing showout. Yeah. And there was that controversial goal where, when the Jets player shot and Bennington got the glove save and the puck crossed the line and the puck was in his glove. I mean, it's a very controversial topic. Yeah. I got to say that was, to me, it's hard. I'm going to say that if the puck crosses the line and you have the glove, the puck's technically in the net, but I mean, it's an inconclusive situation. It's an inconclusive deal. All right, now let's talk about tonight's games. We got 3 of them tonight, all of them on TNT and TBS. Okay, can the Montreal Canadiens home cooking basically get out of this 0-2 down deficit against the Washington Capitals? You know, I got to tell you, Montreal playing in the playoffs, it's magic in there. Playing in Montreal is like a cathedral. It's where the spotlight is on. I would love this series to be more compelling and more exciting. I would love to see Montreal get a dub on this one tonight. I think this is going to be a gentleman's sweep still, but I'm going to go with Montreal tonight. Now we got Carolina and New Jersey. I am definitely going to go with Carolina, but Jersey will win the next game and it will be a gentleman's sweep. But Carolina has been the obvious, more dominant team. They're on a mission. This team, it's all or nothing right now. It is all or nothing for the Carolina Hurricanes. And, New Jersey, they don't have their weapons. I don't see the Devils getting this dub tonight, but I believe they'll get the next dub on the next game, but it'll be a gentleman's sweep. Yeah, I just don't see New Jersey coming back from this one. And lastly, we've got the LA Kings and the Edmonton Oilers. Callum Picard is starting for the Oilers tonight. Stuart Skinner has been very, very cold. And the Oilers, them going back to the Stanley Cup Finals, it's slipping away. I'm going with LA because the Oilers, they made big mistakes, with Broberg and Holloway, etc. I don't want to be like being a dead horse and all, but it's embarrassing to see the Western Conference champs, being slugs right now. And they're not healthy. I am telling you, the LA Kings will win this one tonight. Oh yeah. And now let's get down to the news and the rumors of the day. All right, let's talk about the news and the rumors of the day. Okay, so let's talk about the news and the rumors. Yeah, we mentioned about the Blues. You know, I believe they will be back and getting back into this one. And Dallas, yeah, I mean, you got Maris Hiskinen. He is basically day to day with the knee injury, and he's been sidelined since January 28th. But the Stars, when they get healthy, oh yeah, it's going to be a different series here on out. And along with the other rumors, updates, and stuff, let's talk about this. All right, the New York Islanders. They're a team in a crossroads. I really think that ownership is basically in a free fall, and I really think that they're going to be selling this team very soon. I've been hearing the rumors. It's going to happen. They're going to be sold to the New York Mets. I believe that the owners of the Islanders, they're just doing it for real estate. All right. It's not looking good, behind the scenes. I mean, Patrick Waugh and his staff are on thin ice. No one knows who's going to be the next GM. And I got to tell you, I love those guys, with Anders Lee and Casey Cizikas and all. But this team is going to be a lottery team next year. They're going to be a one of the worst teams in the league. I think the Islanders need some new life in their organization. They need something exciting to get, everything back on track because, their attendance has dipped a lot, and, you know, everything behind the scenes this week for the Islanders, it's been a travesty and, what the hell? You should have kept Greg Picker and Chris King. Why the hell you get rid of them? That was a stupid firing. I don't like the idea of having the TV broadcasters doing a simulcast on the radio. I mean, that is ridiculous. You got to have two teams. You got to have a TV team and a radio team. You can't be like, okay, we're going to just have two guys just doing the TV and the radio simulcast. I am not a fan of it. I am not a fan of it. It's just one of those things like it's a stupid thing, you know, have some money, like, you know, give them another contract, find another role in their organization. But I really think that was gutless by the New York Islanders for what they did to those two long-time radio broadcasters for the New York Islanders. They deserve better. If Greg and Chris are listening to this, they deserve better. What a bunch of crap from the ownership group for doing what they did. Terrible job indeed. All right, now we've got the Pittsburgh Penguins. Erik Karlsson every time, like I got a feeling that he's going to get dealt at the draft. I think the draft is going to be very obnoxious, and I think that he's going to go to a team that's going to be like stupid enough to take his salary. I mean, Penguins are paying his salary. The Sharks are paying his salary. It's a stupid thing. I mean, he might go back to Ottawa or goes to Detroit, but I really think Carlson, I don't know if like I've heard the stories with Carlson and Mike Hoffman, but I don't want to go there. But yeah, I just don't see it. I just don't see it. And yeah, and let's just put it this way with the Penguins, though, still, I think that there's no coaching change in Pittsburgh. I don't see any coaching changes for the foreseeable future. I think Sullivan's going to stay and all. Yeah, so, and then we got the latest on the Ducks and the Rangers. I'm just curious, guys. I'm just curious with this. And I really don't think Joel Quenneville is going to go to New York Rangers or the Anaheim Ducks. If Quenneville comes back, I think it's going to be a bigger circus. I mentioned this yesterday. It was a circus a few years ago when he was with the Panthers. I really think it's one of those things. I don't think, it's a good situation. And I forgot to mention, I know that Cronin's got 1 year left of his contract, but Laviolette as well. I think Crow was in a better situation than Laviolette. Laviolette, lost the locker room. Crow, he's a beauty. Should have kept him for another year, and you would have built a good foundation. But now the young kids don't like being a hard ass. Crow knows talent and he brings results. I don't care. I don't care about those crybabies, you know? I don't care. Crow's a good coach. I'm standing up for him and he's a good friend of mine. All right? Leave the guy alone. All right, now. So we got the coaching situation in Chicago, Anaheim, and Philly that they're trying to get University of Denver Pioneer coach David Carlisle. I don't think Philadelphia would get him because I think Tockett's going to be there. And Chicago, I would not want to go to Chicago. That's a mess of a franchise. And it's just like uncomfortable. But if I was Dave Carlisle, you know, I would contemplate Anaheim because I think Anaheim has got a very good future. You got your goalie with John Gibson, and you've got a very good depth of forwards and defense. I think the Ducks might go with Dave Carlisle. Let's just wait and see on that one, all right? Let's just wait and see right here. And then Jay Woodcraft, I think Jay Woodcraft is going to go to Chicago. I think Woodcraft would be a perfect candidate for the Blackhawks. He's worked with McDavid, and I believe he can do wonders with Bedard. Get a little bit more out of him. And we go over to Toronto, talk about offer sheets. And Matthew Nyes, I tell you, Matthew Nyes, if I were Toronto, I take him over Mitch Marner any day of the week. I think Marner is going to get a big payday. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to the Blackhawks, Utah, or Anaheim. Who knows? I got a feeling we're going to see a very interesting deal. And we're looking at it. I mean, Marco Rossi. He's done wonders. If I were Minnesota, keep him. He's blossoming. He's doing well. You've got to keep that core together, with Kaprizov, etc. And you got Evan Bouchard and Edmonton Oilers. I would sign him. Get him re-signed. I mean, Ekblom with the Oilers not being in the lineup. Ekholm is not in the lineup. Let's put it this way. It's done for the Oilers. Their defense is depleted and looks pretty bad. And Mason McTavish for Anaheim, he's getting better. He's a young kid. I believe that Mason is on the right path. I think he is definitely a player to keep your eyes on. I believe he stays. And now, looking at more information on the doc. But like I said, I really think that we're going to see some very interesting scenarios. All right. We're going to see a very interesting scenarios. All right. Now let's talk about offseason targets. And we got two of them, Panthers and the Oilers. First up, we're talking about the Florida Panthers. The Panthers, they're flirting about a reunion with Alex Lyon. I like that. Pure Suitor, I like him, but Vancouver is willing to give him a lot of money, and there's a potential of a top six situation. This is all situational. Like what if? And Dante Fabro, and the Panthers have done significantly amazing in reclamation projects, and and he could definitely be a good pairing, assuming if Ekblad doesn't re-sign and Jones moves up to the pairing. He's still young, and I believe it's a good opportunity. Now we got the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers, they're looking at John Gibson, they're looking at Jake Allen and Frederick Anderson. It's no surprise. The Oilers goaltending situation is very depleted. I really think they should look for a defenseman as well. They got to get something intact. And yeah, and going back to the Brandon Hagel situation, I really think that if the NHL suspends him, I think it was a very cowardly move, but I really think that it's going to get, like I said, it's going to be an ugly series. And tomorrow it's going to be rocking. And I want to talk about this bizarre situation in London, Ontario. So there is a trial from because of five hockey Canadian players from Team Canada in 2018. The trial basically been a mistrial because the judge dismissed the jury without giving them any explanation, and they'll be selecting a new jury. Yeah, this is gonna get really weird. You know, I don't know how the whole scenario this is, but I really think that it's going to be, like one of those things. But the trial restarts and expected to last 8 weeks. But this is going to be a one of those things. It's going to be a very confusing trial. I really don't know what to think about it. To be honest, I have no idea what to think here. No idea to think about. All right, now we got an interesting development for tonight's game. Patrick Line is a game time decision. Oh boy. Oh boy. And now, and I want to go back to that, Toronto and Ottawa. And I heard the fans, the Ottawa Center fans, they were ruthless on Austin Matthews last night. They were chanting Matthews, balding. Oh God. I mean, that's clever. That's clever. Yeah. So, and the other thing too, there's been some incidences, I forgot to mention here. There were several incidences, with the Blues, the Jets, and the Sens and the Leafs. Basically, there's a lot of tension going on. There's a lot of tension going on. And there was a standoff. So again, went to the dressing room, but yeah, the Blues crowd booing in the incident. I mean, it's really gonna get ugly. It's really getting ugly. And then Sunday, that's the next time they're matching up. It's gonna be a very ugly. Like the deeper the series goes, the more uncharacteristic character comes out of the player. It's gonna be too gnarly and all that. Oh yeah, it's gonna get too gnarly. And hmm, yeah, it's just one of those things. And the last thing I want to talk about is Carolina Hurricanes. Their top prospect from Russia is having some difficulties. It's getting very awkward. It's getting very awkward right now with their top Russian prospect. It's just, like the playing situation, and also just like, if he's going to be playing or not. And this agent of his, right? This agent wants him to get traded. It's like, whoa, dude, whoa. It's just like, really? We're talking about Nikishin. Basically, he's like the agent saying he's threatening him to going back to Russia or demanding a trade because of the contract delays. I mean, it's getting really crazy here. It's getting to the point like, what the hell are we doing here, people? What in the hell are we doing here? Yeah. And going back to the thing is that, with what's going on with this. So Darren Drager said on a tweet saying a twist in the Battle of Ontario with allegations of pregame shenanigans last night. Sources say the NHL is looking at the incident. in warm up prior to the game between the Sens and the Leafs, undermined whether league discipline will follow. And Bruce Garrich going at one point, there were some pucks being lobbed by the Sens in warm-ups, and Stutzel stopped the lob puck near center ice and found it odd. And I don't think anything at the time. And the sources of this warm-up basically Sens players were firing pucks at Stolars. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of childish, immature things going on. I know it's Stanley Cup playoffs, man. I mean, throw away the rule book and it's on, man. It's basically Hunger Games, but it's like the Roman Coliseum, distractions. Here's the bread and the circus and all that stuff. Yeah. But anywho, what a day we're going to be talking. All right. This has been 2 Minutes in the Box with Gordo. Remember, follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, etc. We'll be back here tomorrow with short reel Saturdays. This has been 2 Minutes in the Box with Gordo. Have a great rest of the day and weekend.